Uh, Good afternoon. I'd like to offer a heartfelt thank you to all the committee members first. It's awesome to be invited here to testify. Briefly about myself, my name is Parker Thayer. I'm a researcher with the Capital Research Center, a nonpartisan organization that specializes in researching the flows of money behind the special interest groups seeking to influence public policy and elections. I was born and raised here in Michigan, attended Hillsdale College, and I now reside in Monroe County with my wife and soon a baby girl. It is an honor to testify before the legislature of the state that I hope to always call home. The topic that brings me here today is the nonprofit voter registration industry. It might not sound like a particularly exciting or important topic, and in an ideal world it wouldn't be either. But unfortunately it's both, and particularly in Michigan. Nonprofit voter registration is a massive industry. Impala, it's a company that sells data tools to help nonprofits do fundraising and identify potential new donors, has an estimate of the size of the ecosystem, which is essentially all nonprofits that do voter registration. They have an estimate of the ecosystem size, and this is for the cause that they self-label with voter registration and education. They estimate nationally it generated over $760 million in revenue during 2022, and 23.8 million worth of that ecosystem was in the state of Michigan, which is the graph on the right. Though much more is spent within Michigan by groups outside of our state that would not fall under that ecosystem tag. The overwhelming majority of organizations in this ecosystem are politically left of center. Impala's list is not exhaustive. I would actually estimate that it's not 760 million. I've done extensive research on this. In my capacity at Capital Research Center, I would actually estimate the full size of the national ecosystem is around 1 billion annually, and as I said, the ecosystem in Michigan is much greater than is presented there. For a sense of scale, in the past several cycles, $1 billion annually into this ecosystem of nonprofits would be comparable with the fundraising of the core entities of the national Republican and Democratic parties. So we're talking about a lot of money here, even in politics. One interesting piece of history, it was actually a group right here in Michigan that first started the corruption of the nonprofit voter registration industry in 1967, when the Ford Foundation funded partisan voter registration drives during the Cleveland mayoral election that outraged congressional Democrats so much that they passed the Tax Reform Act of 1969, which created many of the electioneering restrictions on the charitable sector that we still have today. This is a screenshot from the IRS website, generally summarizing what 501c3 nonprofits are able to do in voter registration. The rules as they stand now, without getting into too much detail, require any 501c3 voter registration organization and any voter registration drive they do to have neither the intent nor the effect of favoring a particular candidate or group of candidates in the highlighted section there. The prohibitions are very strict, but as you'll see, many groups have long been openly circumventing those rules. More recently, voter registration work made headlines around Michigan and the nation when a story emerged about thousands of suspicious voter registration forms being submitted in Muskegon by employees of GBI Strategies, a Tennessee-based Democrat canvassing firm, during the 2020 election. The forms were immediately recognized as suspicious due to their inordinate number alongside signatures, dates of birth, and addresses that did not match up with real voters. The police and eventually the FBI were brought in to investigate. It was all very exciting and became somewhat sensationalized, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. What I'm here to talk about is who was paying GBI Strategies to register voters in the first place. During the 2020 election, GBI Strategies had several large PAC clients, including the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, or DSCC for short, Biden for President, and many others that paid them millions for canvassing, phone banking, and voter outreach. But only one client reported paying GBI Strategies for voter registration work. It wasn't a PAC at all, but a 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit by the name of the Voter Registration Project. This is a screenshot from their 2020 Form 990. They reported paying GBI Strategies over $2.5 million for voter registration consulting. Voter registration consulting. You might ask why a 501c3 nonprofit, legally barred, as I mentioned earlier, from any and all partisan electioneering by IRS rules, why would they be paying millions of dollars to a Democrat canvassing and phone banking company? To answer that question, I have to go back to 2016 when the Voter Registration Project, the person paying GBI Strategies for voter registration work, was first created. It's not a story that makes them look very good. The VRP, Voter Registration Project, or VRP for short, apparently got its starts in the bowels of a Democrat consulting firm by the name of Corridor Partners, which created a very sophisticated plan for a nonpartisan voter registration scheme that would take 5 years and $105 million and generate 2.4 million additional voters in 8 swing states by the start of the 2020 election. The plan was initially emailed to Molly McCusick, the president of the Wyss Foundation, the private foundation of Hans-Jörg Wyss, a Swiss billionaire who has poured tens of millions of dollars into American dark money groups and illicitly donated for years directly to candidates despite not being an American citizen. The statute of limitations had expired on these donations by the time people realized he was making them. The details of the plan were ultimately leaked because McCusick inexplicably forwarded the plan to the then presumptive head of Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign, John Podesta, whose emails were later obtained by WikiLeaks, with the simple descriptor, as you can see in the screenshot of the email, new C3 version. The email showed that the blueprints for this plan had been edited, according to the consultants that created it, to be more appropriate for private foundations, meaning less partisan, than a previous version of the plan. By happy coincidence, Corridor Partners left the track changes function, which some of you might be familiar with. They left it on when they sent the email as a Word document, meaning that the original unedited version of the plan is still available for all to see. How exactly was the plan changed from a highly partisan operation into a charitable project permissible for 501c3 organizations? Well, it wasn't really. The complex data tables of potential voters, targeted states, proposed methods, targeted racial demographics, and estimated costs were all the same. The only thing that changed was how they were described. For example, when before the plan had said it would be beneficial to change the outcome of an election, it now said it would be beneficial to change the competitiveness of an election, as you can see in the highlighted section. In another place, political outcomes was changed to voter participation outcomes. You can see how much they care about voter participation and definitely don't care about changing the outcome of elections. At one point, 3 entire paragraphs were deleted entirely because they featured detailed calculations of the way in which this plan, had it been enacted earlier, would potentially have swung the results of past elections won by a Republican to a Democrat instead. Again, this was being proposed as an initiative for 501c3 private foundations which are barred from electioneering. It was still the same partisan electioneering operation it had always been, they just described it differently. And it would become the basis for the largest voter registration operation in the country and thereby the world. That's a direct quote from the founder of this, or the later executive director of this organization. The same group that was paying GBI Strategies for voter registration work in 2020. Months later, more refined blueprints for a nearly identical voter registration scheme appeared once again in Podesta's emails, but this time with the name the Everybody Votes campaign. This would become the public-facing name of the voter registration project and its network, though the VRP did everything in its power to hide its existence and its connection to the Everybody Votes campaign from the public until my reporting in 2023 forced them into the light. With a catchy name decided upon, the Everybody Votes campaign started hiring staff, distributing grants, registering voters, and raking in money from the leading left-wing political donors and dark money groups in America. One of their biggest scores was the endorsement, or secret endorsement I should say, of a Democrat super PAC called Mind the Gap that was created and led by Barbara Fried, the mother of crypto fraudster and Democrat megadonor Sam Bankman-Fried. Vox Media obtained a leaked copy of a memo Mind the Gap sent its donors, advising them that the best way to help Democrats win in 2020 was donating to the Everybody Votes campaign, a 501c3 organization, and another group, also a 501c3, called the Voter Participation Center. Just take a moment and think about that. A Democrat super PAC was advising its donors to send their money elsewhere because a nonpartisan voter registration group was so much better than them at being partisan. It doesn't sound right. The memo explicitly instructs donors to keep the existence of the Everybody Votes campaign a secret from the media and Republicans, because if their identity were to become public knowledge, somebody might try to stop or investigate them. The scheme actually worked so well in 2020 that Mind the Gap sent out a similar memo in 2024 that was leaked once again, telling donors to give generously to the Everybody Votes campaign to best aid Democrats with winning. Didn't work as well the second time around. In 2023, the latest year of financial disclosures available, the Everybody Votes campaign network of nonprofits, comprised of 3 nonprofits, but centered around this voter registration project that I mentioned, raised over $47 million, and their website, only published after I broke the news about them, now advertises that they have registered a staggering 7 million voters over their lifetime, which would be nearly 5% of all people that voted in the 2024 presidential election, as best as I can tell. The group was so active in Michigan during the 2024 election that they actually hired a Michigan state director who seems to still be operating here. To answer my earlier question, why was a nonpartisan charity paying millions of dollars to a Democrat consulting firm like GBI Strategies? Well, it's because the nonprofit was designed with partisan intent from the very beginning. If you want further proof, look no further than the current executive director of the Everybody Votes campaign slash VRP, Nellie Sayers. Her previous job, executive director of the Wisconsin Democratic Party. GBI Strategies isn't even the only recipient of Everybody Votes campaign funds that has been embroiled in a scandal. At least 3 other Everybody Votes campaign consultants and grantees have been the subject of major scandals surrounding illicit partisanship or fraudulent voter registrations. First, this past cycle, stories emerged from York County, Pennsylvania, of another Democrat canvassing firm, Field Plus Media Corps, that had submitted thousands of voter registration forms on behalf of the Everybody Votes campaign. According to county authorities, less than half of the forms were found to be legitimate. Voter registration forms submitted by Field Plus Media Corps in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, Maricopa County, Arizona, Navajo County, Arizona, and Mojave County, Arizona were also investigated because of the suspicion that they were fraudulent by local authorities. It is unclear as of yet how much money Field Plus Media Corps was paid by the Everybody Votes campaign because Form 990s are only available on a 2-year delayed basis, so we won't know until 2026. But employees of the organization self-reported that they were working on behalf of the Everybody Votes campaign when they submitted these voter registrations. Second, in January, the New Georgia Project, a 501c3 nonprofit created by Stacey Abrams, was fined $300,000 for illicit partisan electioneering on Abrams' behalf during her 2018 gubernatorial campaign. It's the largest fine in the history of the Georgia State Ethics Commission, and the Georgia State Senate has now launched its own investigation. The New Georgia Project has received nearly $3 million in grants from the Everybody Votes campaign. And during the year of the alleged confirmed campaign finance violations, a $1 million grant from the Everybody Votes campaign accounted for over half of the New Georgia Project's revenues. Finally, in the lead up to the 2020 election, the Everybody Votes campaign granted over $10 million to the Voter Participation Center, the second largest nonprofit voter registration group in the nation. The Voter Participation Center, or VPC for short, you might remember, was the other group named in that Mind the Gap memo that named them as the most cost-effective group for netting additional Democratic votes in the country. The VPC is active in numerous states, including Michigan, estimating in their 2020 election impact report that they generated a net of 16,000 votes in the Pleasant Peninsula. The group was most recently in the news when reporters at the Washington Free Beacon unearthed that the VPC was using filters to exclude certain audiences from its nonpartisan voter registration ads on Facebook and Instagram. Data from the Facebook Transparency Ad Library shows that the VPC went out of its way to use what are called exclude filters, so that users with interests like PGA Tour, Indianapolis 500, Daytona 500, Tom Clancy, Modified Jeeps, Duck Dynasty, and many others were not shown their nonpartisan voter registration ads that reminded them to register to vote. Meanwhile, the VPC used include filters so that their ads were shown and were shown much more to Facebook and Instagram users interested in African American literature, Jordan Peele, Taylor Swift, Patagonia, and hot yoga. It's painfully obvious that the purpose of these filters was to exclude possible Republican voters from a nonpartisan voter registration effort, while targeting likely Democrat voters. Some people's civic participation apparently matters more than others, in their view, and I, for one, would love to see the data that the VPC used to determine that Duck Dynasty enjoyers in swing states didn't need to be registered as much as Taylor Swift enjoyers in swing states. VPC, like Everybody Votes, has also paid enormous sums of money to Democrat political consulting firms. Over the last several years, the group paid $17.8 million to Michigan Control, a canvassing firm that advertises itself as, quote, the most successful direct mail firm working in Democrat politics today. It has also paid $40 million to the Pivot Group, another powerful Democratic consulting firm that boasts about winning races, this is another quote, winning races from the municipal level to Congress and from the state house to the statewide office. Again, as I mentioned earlier, 501c3 organizations are not supposed to be engaging in electioneering, and they're paying $40 million to a canvassing firm that brags about how much they're influencing the outcome of elections and doing electioneering. There's a pattern here, if it isn't apparent yet. Everywhere the Everybody Votes campaign sends money, scandals seem to follow that damage the good name of the American charitable sector and harm the public's trust in our elections. As the self-described largest voter registration group in the world, Everybody Votes is not an exception to the rule, but the standard. Take another example from the industry, one closer to home. The Michigan Center for Election Law and Administration. The Michigan Center for Election Law and Administration is a 501c3 charity that was initially founded in 2008 by our current Secretary of State, Jocelyn Benson, who ran the group up until 2018 when she stepped aside to run for office. From 2008 to 2019, the organization reported less than $50,000 in revenue annually, essentially meaning that they did not raise any money during that time. Then, in 2020, the organization suddenly received just over $12 million from the Center for Election Innovation and Research, one of the two organizations responsible for distributing the $400 million in Zuckbucks that have now become infamous on behalf of Mark Zuckerberg. Benson was aware of the grant, apparently in advance, discussing it in a press release at the time, saying that the money would, quote, help to ensure that all Michiganders know how to vote absentee from home, early at their clerk's office, or at the polling place on Election Day, and can do so with confidence that their vote will be counted. That's a goal I admire, but how is the money actually spent? Much like the Everybody Votes campaign and the Voter Participation Center, almost every penny of the $12 million went to top Democrat political consulting firms. $9.7 million was paid to Waterfront Strategies, a Democrat political consulting firm, whose top clients at the time were Chuck Schumer's Senate and House majority PACs. Another $2 million went to Alper Strategies, LLC, the political consulting firm of Jill Alper, one of Michigan's top Democrat political consulting firms. Both of the payments were labeled as being for media strategy and purchase, as you can see, though it is hard or impossible to find the actual content of the ads that the group paid for. The Meta Ad Transparency Library shows that the group spent up to $52,000 on Facebook and Instagram ads during 2020, but they were all apparently taken down by Meta for violating the platform's political ad disclaimer policies. It's rather ironic given that Meta's CEO was the one who provided the funds for those ads in the first place. It's mind-boggling how brazen the scheme was. Are we really expected to believe that top Democrat political consulting firms didn't inject partisanship into their nonpartisan get-out-the-vote ads? Perhaps by using the same exclude filters on Facebook that I mentioned the Voter Participation Center using. It would be impossible to tell now because the data has been removed by Meta. So it's hard to say if they did use filters, but it certainly seems like a possibility. And even if they were entirely nonpartisan and completely above board, money is fungible. Are we really expected to believe that the Michigan Center for Election Law and Administration couldn't have found a single advertising company whose biggest clients weren't Democratic PACs? The same question goes, of course, for the Everybody Votes campaign and the Voter Participation Center, who have both been very active in Michigan. Is there no one else they could find to run their voter registration ads and canvassing operations? As you can see, partisanship is infecting the great American charitable sector under the guise of civic-minded charity, and there's no reason nonprofit voter registration groups and education groups like these should be allowed to continue their schemes unquestioned and uninvestigated. This partisan rot also poses a serious threat to American election integrity. While foreign nationals and foreign governments are totally barred from making contributions to PACs, there is no such prohibition on foreign funding of 501c3 organizations and voter registration groups. Say that a foreign government wanted to interfere in an election here in Michigan. All they would need to do is write a large check to a less than scrupulous nonprofit that promises to do, quote, nonpartisan voter registration within the areas or demographics of the state that just so happen to favor that foreign government's preferred candidate or political party. It would be totally untraceable, tax exempt, and, as Mind the Gap explained in their leaked memos that I showed you, highly effective. I think members of this committee on both sides of the aisle would object if their opponent were to be found benefiting from such a scheme funded by a foreign government or foreign donor. Now, I'm not against voter registration. I think it's the civic duty of every citizen to register to vote, and I think it's good when they do. But the way it's being done by these supposedly charitable organizations is clearly over the line. It's time to close the loopholes, restore the good name of the American charitable sector, protect our voter rolls, and protect our elections from foreign interference. I thank the committee for its time and its invitation today, and if any member of the committee has any further questions or would like to see additional documentation of my research, I am more than happy to provide answers now or in written questions for the record.